From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishan. Over on the northern side of the Green River Gamelands, there are a few dozen properties that most of us have probably never seen. Kayakers who want to take out or put in where the upper green ends and the narrows begin, and hikers and mountain bikers who've done the Pulliam Creek or Bishop Branch Trail will be familiar with the area, but not as a place to live, just to park. I'm willing to bet most Polk County residents aren't even aware that it's part of Polk County. After all, the only real access is from Upward Road in Henderson County, just northeast of exit 53 off I-26. It's kind of an enclave that reminds me of Point Roberts in Washington State, a town at the end of a peninsula you can only get to by driving through British Columbia, or the northwest angle of Minnesota, which is only accessible from the rest of the state by boat or by road through Ontario. My guess is you haven't heard of either of those places. And it's okay if you haven't. I had never given much thought who might be living on Big Hungry Road, which is kind of embarrassing for a podcaster who claims to care about the geography of Polk County. Even more embarrassing was how I found out about the story you're about to hear. I heard about it from an old friend and colleague of mine, Nathan Vanderclip, who is now a roving reporter for the Globe and Mail, which is kind of like a Canadian cousin of the New York Times. He was in town to report on how western North Carolina was handling voting in the wake of Tropical Storm Helene. And Nathan only heard about it because the Brennan Center for Justice, which is a national nonprofit that pays attention to things like voter access, posted a story on its website. A story about how Polk County Director of Elections Cliff Marr had to find a way to get absentee ballots to the folks living in the Big Hungry area, even though a bridge on Big Hungry Road had been destroyed by the flooding that followed the storm. The Washington Post also picked up the story, and I'll put links to all of them in the episode notes. Fortunately, Cliff let Nathan and me tag along on his fourth and final trip to what remains of that bridge as part of his duties to ensure everyone in Polk County gets a chance to vote. There, we crossed a makeshift walkway that had replaced a cable for hauling supplies across the Hungry River. Then we climbed a somewhat rickety set of stairs and scaffolding to meet Mike Marsteller, who had taken on the job of collecting the absentee ballots from everyone still trapped up there. That's just the beginning of the story, though. After the election, I went back to meet with Mike and his wife Ginger to talk about how the storm had changed their little piece of the planet, which until recently wasn't really even a community in the conventional sense. I'm not trying to find a silver lining in the aftermath of a disaster, but what's happened there is a good news story, and I think it's a story that says a lot about who we are and how we should be thinking about our relationships with each other and the world around us. We talked on the deck of their house on English Heifer Cove Road, which, by the way, has a spectacular view. Mike and Ginger Marsteller, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you.
Let's begin by telling me the story, the life path that you have taken that brought you to this somewhat remote and mostly forgotten part of Polk County.
So about 14 years ago, we opted to move in this area with my parents were here first. They picked up this property, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was more like the late 90s. And then we had a place in Etowah, and we come up here, of course, and visit my parents. And then in 2014, my father passed away. And at that point in time, my mom decided she wanted something smaller, a little closer to town. So we ended up purchasing the property from her. So that's when we've kind of been here solo since 2014. And I retired 2 years ago in January from Henderson County Sheriff's Office with 30 years of service there. And then I last year became a Polk County deputy, reserve deputy. Can't do it full time because of the retirement issues. But the reason for that was I wanted to be a deputy where I live in Polk County. And it was kind of interesting because most deputies in Polk County have not been where we live. And I would jokingly say, hey, I'm a Polk County resident. I want to see you guys up here on patrol. And now they don't have to because this is where I live, and I'll handle a lot of calls if they come up here, if they call me. So that's kind of how we got here. And the community, as far as we know some folks here, but not really to the degree before the storm that you would like we do now, like a family, if you will. You throw up your hand, you recognize a car from a neighbor. At least in our community, we recognize them. From other ones, I had no idea who anybody was.
Okay, so the nature of the community really didn't factor into your choice to buy this property, right?
No, in fact, just the opposite. The lack of community in a lot of ways is what really appealed to us, is the fact that we can't see neighbors from here other than there's a house over there on that ridge line that's probably, well over a mile away. That's it. You can see the towers of Tryon Peak from our deck, but other than that, you don't see neighbors. And if somebody shows up in my house, they mean to be here. It's not a happening by.
Nobody accidentally comes to your house.
I can't say that. They do, because Pullum Creek Trail runs right through the middle of our property.
How many acres you got?
18.
Okay.
And the rest is state game, of course, but that trail, the state wanted to buy the trail from us and the other side, or even get credit for it, and we weren't really interested. I don't mind if folks hike it, and I don't mind if the state maintains it. I just don't want to sell it. And
would you say that your approach to why you're here and why you like it is shared by the other folks? Like, people like their big pieces of property not abutting up against other folks?
That's what we've been hearing, recently as we've come together a little more, talking and meeting people in the community. That truly is the feeling that a lot of people have here, is you like this environment. It's an inconvenient environment sometimes from the get-go, because you're very far from stores and civilization, if you will. But they love the beauty and the solitude. It's a place to come where you just feel peaceful, and just kind of enjoy a nature admiring kind of life. And I believe that most in the community share that. And that was one of the comments that was made when we talked about why we haven't talked to each other. We're not unfriendly people, but just a lot of people here, they go about their business and they like their home life to be kind of a solitary life where you just enjoy the location, you enjoy nature, you come home from work and you kind of just shut out the world. And I do believe that's a common factor.
So until like 6 weeks ago, you really didn't know the folks who are the closest thing to a neighbor, right?
Not real well, no. We would wave at each other and be friendly in passing. And like with a few of the families we've known before, possibly even shared a meal with, but certainly not all 12, 13 homes in this community and on our road itself, let alone the ones further back the mountain. We only really, I think I personally believed that there was only one house back there because I can see it from my back deck.
So how many folks are there who kind of share the Big Hungry watershed, if I would use those?
So in this community, we did right when we were all having our meetings at the mailbox, we counted up how many folks were back here just so we knew to tell our emergency operations center. And we counted 78 at that point in time that were actually physically here. We've heard that if you counted everybody that has property here that would have been home or that were still here as far as not on a vacation or something of that nature, it'd be 113. And then our population in here fluctuates from anywhere from 68 to 83.
Okay, so on average, 75 folks.
75 would probably be a reasonable number.
And then we had Tropical Storm Helene, which nobody expected, and no one in the entire western North Carolina anticipated the kind of damage that we suffered. So you moved here thinking, oh, this, there are downsides to living in this part of the world. There are challenges. There are road maintenance issues, but you did not anticipate getting cut off. Because that bridge that went out on Big Hungry Road, that's a sizable bridge, right?
Right, and there's a dam that broke before the bridge is why that went out. As vicious as it did, if you will. So yeah, when you kind of do, at least I do, a threat assessment when you pick a place to live. If you're in town, you want to look at your neighborhood. You want to see what you may have to maneuver around, if you will. When you live out in the rural areas, you want to look at what natural disasters, like flooding and things like that. We never really worried about flooding. I mean, if it flooded here, we'd need an ark because the water would be really high. But things like mudslides and things like that, you have to think about. Well, we're in our homes and everything else up here. I did the assessment and felt pretty good about it. I didn't think the storm was gonna. When we went to bed Thursday night, thought we were gonna get a lot of wind, maybe some trees down, lose our power for a while, but never what actually happened. That didn't cross my mind.
When do you know that the bridge was out?
That would be Saturday. We got rumors of it Friday. So the storm hit early Friday morning. So you go to bed Thursday night, wake up at about 4 a.m. is when we started. We didn't really go back to sleep because this tree, as you can see, is collapsed right over here. Made a lot of racket when it hit. Part of my chimney's gone, and that made a lot of noise. So you're laying and kind of there going, man, this place is coming apart because it was a easterly wind, and that's east. So it slammed our house. So you're kind of like thinking to yourself, man, I can't imagine the carnage when I wake up. Well, when we did wake up on Friday, or not wake up, when we got up and it was daylight, we could see some trees down, and it was bad, but damage assessment to our homes could have been a lot worse, and certainly nothing that precluded us from living here. And then I saw a neighbor come into our yard, one of the younger neighbors down below, and he said, man, it's total carnage in English heifer. Good luck getting out of our roads. And so he took a chainsaw and cut his way to where we are here up my driveway. And I just told him, I said, look, let's leave for Friday. Let's not do anything as far as cutting out because A, it's still raining, and B, it's windy. And all of this water that we've got and all of the mud, the soaked ground, we don't know what's going to continue to fall or what's not. So it's not a good idea to be working on Friday. So pretty much everybody just stayed secluded on Friday. Then Saturday, when it dried up and sun came out, that's when we started getting out and starting to cut our way out. We cut our neighbor out to this side of our home, down the street there a little ways. He had a tractor. We cut him out first, and he used the tractor and followed us. And we cut our way all the way out English heifer. And by the time we got up to Big Hungry Road, the communities from down the road had already cut their way towards us. So we all kind of met at the mailboxes. And then a few folks walked down to the bridge and came back with news that not only is the dam broken, the bridge is gone, but there's a landslide before you get to that, and before you even get to that, there's a huge, massive sinkhole that took out the road. So, yeah, we weren't going anywhere anytime soon. No power, and cell phone was so sporadic you couldn't hardly talk anywhere.
So what did you do? I mean, how did you organize a collective response?
Well, at that point, you're hit with reality that we're all standing at the mailbox, and folks were coming back from the bridge and giving a report of what they were seeing. And at that point in time, you just basically get everybody's attention, and everybody kind of got quiet. And okay, here's what we need to do. Let's get an assessment on who's here, make sure nobody's hurt, buried, in their house, and needs any kind of assistance like that, so go back to your communities, check on your neighbors, and then let's report back at the mailboxes at 6 o'clock tonight and see where we're at. Well, 6 o'clock came, we met back at the mailboxes, and there was probably, I don't know, what did you say, 50 of us at least? And anyway, about 50 of us met back at the mailbox, and which case they were saying, hey, we got some folks that need to get out of here because of medical issues, not emergency type thing, but they can't stay here for the long haul.
Not without the power.
Not without power, because you got some that needed electricity to work with the kind of medical needs they needed without going into details. And a few folks, at least 2, were blind and needed to, a couple of them needed some medication that they couldn't get here. And then we had an infant that had some needs and a special needs child. So that being said, we assessed that we needed to get 8 people out of here Saturday night. And so we I sent a team to get lat longs, GPS coordinates, to 2 LZs, which is landing zones for helicopter. And once they had those numbers, we were able to make contact with Henderson County's EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and gave them the lat long for LZ1 and told them, and I was talking to the county manager who I knew, and his name was John Mitchell, and I told John, I said, we need to get 8 people out of here. And we need some kind of supplies for medicines and different things. And they said, okay. And they made it happen. Said that Sunday was when we had the first helicopter come in. The South Carolina Heart team, which is interesting in itself, is not even North Carolina, but South Carolina's Heart team helicopters came in, met us at LZ1. They took out at least 3-4 patients, made 2 trips. Then we told them we needed some epinephrine, because one of the interesting things that happened here was once all the flooding hit, I guess scientifically, I can't really speak to it because I'm not a scientist, but the disturbances of some of these ground from the water and everything else for yellow jackets and hornets, they were rampant. And people are getting stung left and right just standing outside. I mean, crazy. All these yellow jackets and ground hornets or whatever they are were stinging people. So we needed some epinephrine, we needed Benadryl, we needed some saline. We had a paramedic here and a couple nurses so we could put that to use. So the South Carolina Heart team flew down, picked up the medical supplies we needed, and flew back. And then we shipped out 2 more. And then on Monday, we had a family that was trying to make it, and then they had to throw in the towel Sunday night. They had a horrible night, and medication wasn't taking effect for them with no power, and said they had to leave. So we had a Black Hawk come in from the North Carolina Guard. They brought in some MREs and some water, and then they medevac 3 out at that point in time, and that gave us our total of 8 that got medevaced out.
Now, the kind of language you're using and your approach to this, it seems like the folks here were kind of lucky that they had you on hand, because former police officer, former helicopter pilot, it seems like you kind of had a little bit of training for this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely was trained, and I've always been on kind of the other side of this, going to respond to natural disasters and things. I would go to the coast and help hurricane victims and things like that throughout my career, and flying helicopters and stuff like that for them. Now going to this event where I'm on the receiving end of it was really strange. It did help to know what we needed and what we wanted and how to triage. And I'll be straightforward and honest. It's yes, it has a lot to do with training, but the truth of the matter is we prayed about it when the weather hit Thursday night, and prayed, asked God to give us wisdom and strength. And let me tell you, that happens. When we ask for it, it happened. and it's like second nature, where it just pops in your head. This is what we need to do. And yes, a lot of it is from training, and I believe that I'm here for that reason. A side story, if I may, and you can edit it if you wish, but 2 years ago, I was declared almost dead. I got COVID so bad that I was in the hospital for 3 months and in a coma for almost 18 days. 17, and they were going to pull the plug on me, and God spared me. And when I was in the coma, I was told by the realm I was in that they weren't done with me yet. Maybe it was for this moment. I don't know. But that's what happened, and numerous miracles happened there, and I was able to get out of the hospital with at Advent, actually, through hit every stage of it. They gave me a tracheotomy, they had all the stuff, and they weren't expecting me to. I've been shocking the doctors ever since. A, I'm alive. B, I didn't have to have a lung transplant. And C, I went back to law enforcement, did all the combat, plus I've got my flight medical back, and to the point that I have is just there's no explanation. And so, and here we are to this point, and yeah, obviously I'm here, and I've been trained and have all of these skill sets, if you will, but you don't count on using them. You don't even know how you'd use it until you actually have to, I guess, and it helps to have some extra guidance, if you will.
Well, and were there you mentioned paramedics and nurses. There are other folks in the community who had some skills to bring to the table?
We have a paramedic that works for Henderson County EMS. He's a supervisor and a fireman. Our own daughter works for Henderson County Rescue Squad. So we have a few nurses in the community that have that in their background. They may or may not be actively nursing, if you will, but have those skill sets, yes.
Okay, I also want to talk about the less dramatic but still very important role you played in the election, because that's how I came about here, right? I heard about the fact that the director of elections, Cliff Marr, had to drive up here 4 times to exchange the request for absentee ballots and the ballots, and then so 4 trips in total. And you're the one that shuttled them back and forth?
Yeah, so the question was asked before by somebody, how much did this play into effect as far as voting goes and everything else? And the truth be known, if this storm had happened a week before the elections, we wouldn't really be that interested in voting because we have so many other things to get taken care of. But because of the timing and the fact that we were trying to establish a new norm as a community well before the election, at one of our mailbox meetings, somebody asked about voting. What are we going to do to vote? How are we going to vote? And so I said, I'll look into it. And so then I called Polk County Board of Elections, and I asked them, hey, I'm at the end of Big Hungry. I said, if it's okay, on election day, can you guys, I'll meet you at the bridge where the scaffolding is and with a generator. If you don't mind, will you guys bring in a voting booth and we'll just vote here at the scaffolding? And they said, we can't do that. It's not within the rules and regulations. So we'll have you talk to Cliff Marr and see what we can come up with. So Cliff got on the phone, and he and I spoke, and then he decided to meet me at the end of at the scaffolding. We brought up 100 absentee ballots, and I was able to disseminate that to the folks at their meeting, and they could fill out their applications. Once the application was filled out, we had to return them. Then they'd get the packet, the absentee packet. He'd bring those back, and then we'd turn that back in.
So that brings up the question of, because you mentioned that people probably wouldn't be thinking about voting too much, except you had some time in your hands because no one could go anywhere, right? So you thought about voting. And what else has changed about how people look at their role in the bigger community because of this?
So right after these events and when we're having our meetings, I think an important part of this community and I say community is not just English Heifer Cove, but Spurgeon Cove and Scarlet Mountain, everybody that's back here from the bridge on back, we would meet at the mailboxes, and different days, even after we made the LZs and everything else, we'd separate into teams. We'd have saw teams. Hey, if you guys would use your chainsaws and tractors to dig these folks out and cut this little path here and go find us this team, go look for a way out of here besides this bridge, because it's going to be a while. And then we had a team that went down to the bridge, and we had some folks that set up a zip line, and a family that was in charge of the zip line for that whole time that stayed there until wee hours of the morning and sometimes all night. And then,
so just to be sure, this is not a zip line like the gorge zip line where people go across.
Correct.
This was where supplies would get pulled back and forth across a cable.
Right. That zip line, we estimated at one point in time we brought well over a ton of food, and that does not include fuel. So fuel cans, food, and things like that, well over a ton.
Okay, so before the storm, you didn't have regular community meetings at the mailbox.
Nope. No, we didn't. Like I say, we threw up our hands waving at folks most of the time, maybe not even all the time. And then we started having these community meetings and folks needing things to do and helping, rolling up their sleeves to pitch in and what can we do? And we had the teams that were used a tractor to make a bypass around the sinkhole, and then we had another team that would some folks, Ginger and others, would take food and drink to the folks working so that they would be nourished and stuff, so they didn't have to stop. And we had a guy that had broke out his welder and fixed equipment as it would break, if it broke, and a couple times it did. So I mean, we had our guy named Andrew Reed has a lot of properties in here, offered up his properties and as a place to put the food and things that came in from the community that were overstock, because nobody up here would hoard or even fight for anything. We'd just look at what we'd want or need, and then the rest of it would go into an outpost-like store, if you will, for lack of better terms, and just folks would go in and get what they needed when they needed it. And otherwise, it was just a huge blessing in that light. But then we had people in our community that needed to organize that in itself. That can get overwhelming at times. You know, you can get so inundated at the beginning of a disaster of help, well-meaning good intentions of people wanting to help. But if you don't have the means or the ability to take all of those supplies and effectively organize it and store it, well, then it becomes almost a burden in some cases. But it didn't in ours, because we had a place to store it. We had people to organize it. We had the resources here and the willingness of folks to just roll up their sleeves and pitch in. And that's what was amazing about this whole thing.
Well, Ginger, what are your impressions about this place that you now call home? How has it changed?
Well, one of the things that I kind of wanted to comment on as a spinoff of what Mike just said is the disposition of the community. And, we kind of briefly hit on, potential God's purposes and some of the things in our past that, we went through with Mike's medical situation and then going from that to this, that time in our life was also kind of a tragedy. But, in the beginning, it was definitely a trial. It ended up, wonderful ending. But, having some skills, intellectual skills, physical skills, always comes into play as far as using what the Father has equipped you with, and whatever giftings, whatever abilities that you have is always something that you would bring to the table, and sometimes even just a little good sense, But one of the things that I feel like is undeniable, really is kind of has to be attributed to divine things, is the disposition of our community. because no amount of skills by an individual has the ability to produce that type of unity that we've seen and experienced in the community through this situation. I think as human beings, we can all attest that it's probably been very seldom in life that you can get together a group of 78 people,
most of whom don't really know each other.
Who don't really know each other, and certainly not all alike. Certainly, no two are alike, let alone 78, that would be like-minded just almost like instantaneously. Again, no issues with people, kind of having the each man for himself mentality. It was kind of like I have no other word for it. It was just divine. That just doesn't happen. And it did. In this situation, it certainly did. And I know that, one of the things from our personal knowledge, and if you were able to interview each person in the community, you would get to hear their personal comments as well. But you're hearing kind of our perspective and trying to summarize, what we saw there in the whole community. But, I know that early on when this happened, as a matter of fact, Saturday morning, I kind of felt like Friday was a day of processing everything that was just more than you ever thought your eyes would see, and looking around. Saturday morning, before we got out of bed, and I had, shared with Mike, we talk about our thoughts and feelings and plans like every day through this, but I feel like I felt in my heart the Lord say to me, this is practice for a mission. This is what, y'all need to get out there and help. I won't take long on a backstory, but I felt like for several years that our family is called to do missions, and it just has not been the time yet. It has not been, and feeling like God saying, I will tell you when and where and how. It's not something for you to go make happen, just, kind of sit on it. So we had never really made that known to anyone outside of our family. And then when this happened, I felt like him saying, this is practice. This is a mission in and of itself. You must get out there and help. And, I know for me, our family has always kind of, we're not preppers by any means, but just have seen the wisdom in being a little bit prepared for life that may not always be convenient or comfortable. So extra food rations and things like that. Our family, I feel like we were prepared for a short period of time, not a forever period of time, but a period of time where we could manage. And that gave me great peace. But early on, I think day 2, maybe day 3, as we were going out into the community, it was communicated straight up by a couple of families that they were not prepared and very concerned and knew that they would not be able to make it for the long haul by looking around, what you see beyond just a few days. And that to me was kind of a new reality that I had never been able to prepare for. Again, you kind of always think of, well, if stuff really hits the fan, times get hard, then it is going to be me looking out for my family. We're not going to be connecting with others at the community. You will kind of hole up and, do what you got to do to survive. But for the first time ever, that reality hit me in the face, and that part kind of took away some of my peace. And I told Mike, I said, I feel good that I don't have to rely on too much external sources, but I also couldn't stand the thought to know that someone else needed something. And so we did. We prayed. I knew that if there were, 75 people outside of my family of 3, if there were 75 people that needed help, I was not prepared for that. And so ask for God's help. And he answered in so many miraculous ways that we were all in awe. Even people in the community that maybe have never seen anything like that. It's just, without words. But it's hard to deny.
So we're talking about a change, a paradigm shift in the way people see their place in the bigger scheme of things here, right?
Yes.
'Cause you had all these folks like yourself who really, you didn't move here so you could be part of a dense community, of shops and restaurants and stuff. And yet you have discovered that being on your own isn't really the ideal situation all the time, right?
That is a perfect explanation of what a few of the folks in our community has shared openly. They said going into this, I mean, right down to they prepared with, copious amounts of food, ammunition, concertina wire. I mean, literally able to, but they were looking at it all from the standpoint of trying to fend off, everything and everybody but themselves.
When civilization collapses.
When civilization collapses and they were only thinking about them and their piece of property in the community. Well, okay. And again, you're looking, I wasn't too far from that mindset myself. But when it actually happened and we came to the realization that we're all in this together and nobody's going anywhere, we pulled our resources together. And like I say, those meetings and giving people teaming up and doing different assigned tasks and recognizing each meeting night, if you could imagine, when we go to the mailboxes, we have now throughout the day hauled food from the community and the churches and different folks that have been helping us. They would send it up the zip line. We put it on a trailer behind an ATV and drive it up and unload it at the mailbox. And then we go back and get another one. Well, it started out with just one trailer, and then it became 2 trailers, and then 3 trailers, and then 4, and then it's like, holy Moses, we're no longer, now we've got this massive area at the mailboxes that looks like a big storage area. And we're like, wow, we even put up a kind of a tent to keep it from hitting the sun, hitting it and everything else. And then we're like, we need a house. And so we a guy in the community, hey, I've got an empty house. Let's use that. And mind you, we still have not had power at that point. Sketchy on internet or no power. And cell phone was hit or miss. So the way we were talking to people about any kind of needs we were needing, we were first met by Henderson County EOC via telephone. For some reason, my cell phone worked at the mailboxes when we were talking. One time, and I was able to tell them what we needed, and it happened. And they sent us fuel and MREs and things like that. And that kind of like what Ginger was saying about how you're going to feed some families who came up and admittedly said, we're not here for we can't make it the long haul. We don't have enough food to last a couple days, much less, weeks or months. And so it weighs on you a little bit on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And man, the community stepped up. The folks came in and started giving the stuff to the point to where it was an abundance. And then we had some special forces guys that came in that said of our community, he goes, hey, we go around teaching communities what our skill sets are and how you guys can survive. But when we came up to your community, not only were you surviving, but you're thriving. And that was a testimony to them. And they're actually coming back tomorrow to check on us again. And they're like staying with us. We had them stay with us a few times. And I mean, what do you say? It's kind of neat.
Well, it sounds like, there's kind of a profound change here. I'd be a little bit sort of journalistic cynical here. Is it going to last? Do you think this has fundamentally changed the way people see their community? Or 6 months from now, things are back to normal? Will people drift apart again?
I think there's a new normal right now. We wanted to cut our meetings at the mailboxes. We're like, oh, well, we don't need to meet anymore. We have a scaffolding down there, and we have what they call the goat trail to get in and out in the back way. But then folks are like, no, we need to still meet. And so we've now got it down to Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5, and then giving updates and things like that as we know it. And then Fridays is our community dinner that we have at one of the houses here. And then
And that's another new thing.
that's actually been a thing since this started. On Fridays, since the storm hit, we needed something like a Friday night pizza night was the first one, because you got folks in here that are working hard, they're stressed, everything's all, and the world's upside down. What we knew, we don't even know what's going on outside of here. We hear rumors of looting and all these things going on, but we don't know. And so Friday night pizza night is when it started, and then the next Friday night, I forgot what it was. Hamburgers, and then we had a catered, because one of the people trapped up in here is a caterer, and he had catering barbecue. I mean, it was amazing foods that we've had on Friday nights as a community, and then, but even that's still going. So to answer your question, do I feel like, I do believe 6 months from now, when you got a good bridge going in and out, we're going to be back to somewhat normalcy. But I can tell you this, it's forever changed us as a community, as far as now I know so-and-so who lives at such and such, and there's a newfound, it's almost the love your neighbor as yourself. You can almost do that now. We're family, and we gave this speech at the mailbox. Look, we're all family. We're here. We have it's a lot of different demographics up here. And I mean different, okay? But we're family. And that's, sometimes you get mad at your brother or your sister, but you're still family. And that's kind of how it goes. And that's how it's been. There's been some rough edges and a little bit of tiffs here and there, but I'll tell you what it boiled down to at the very end, we're family. And we still take care of them, and they still take care of us. And I mean, we're still on the same team, and it didn't change things, and that's kind of neat. So 6 months from now, we'll probably not be, I would imagine, I know we won't be having the mailbox meetings every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Probably Friday night will happen for a while longer, and then once the bridge is in, the plan is to the outpost store, basically when we can get trailers in and out, return what we can and pass it forward to another community that may be in need. But right now we're needing in ourselves in the fact that there's some folks that can't still leave, that haven't left since before the storm because of the way the roads are and the options. That scaffolding, you went through it.
It's a little bit on the shaky side.
It's a little shaky, and you can see through it. And I guess some people with a little issue with heights, it's a little daunting.
Stuff,
and carrying. Oh, yeah. So, and at night, raining. But like I say, so we're keeping the outpost store, if you will, for a while for folks that, for most everybody, utilizes it. And then once we get the bridge and we get the trailer, we can get in and out with. We'll be able to start fixing up our homes again and getting people in here to help us work and get materials. We can't do that right now. And
but most folks' houses weren't, I think you said, not a lot of damage, right?
Occupied homes weren't. There was some that are building a house that had a lot of damage. Some of Andrew's places had a few trees that hit up against it, but nothing severe. So we were blessed as a community, and everybody recognizes that no, nobody's homeless up here. Everybody can, had some minor roof damage, but it was fixed easy enough. Problem is again, cleanup and materials right now, because you can't get fire EMS in here, at least without a lot of hassle. That wouldn't be something to be. That's still weighs in the back of my mind.
You got to be careful for next little while.
Have to be careful, medically and physically. Yeah, you want to be careful because help isn't just 15, 20 minutes down the road like it used to be.
All right. Well, unless you got any other little lessons learned that you want to share, I think we've got a good story there.
I can't think of anything other than if it's amazing when you go to bed Thursday night and you wake up Friday morning, your world is completely changed. And it's still, we still don't know how this movie ends because we're still in it.
All right, well, we'll wrap up there then because the story isn't over, but maybe we'll check in a year from now and see how you guys are doing.
That'd be great.
All right, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one clarification before I go. Technically, there are alternative routes that don't involve Henderson County if you want to get out of the Big Hungry community. And I think it's safe to call it one now, although I do intend to check in again in a year to see how things are going. But most of those routes involve private roads, and none are suitable for anything but ATVs and the most aggressive SUVs. Ambulances and fire trucks and anyone driving a Prius are definitely going to have to go through Henderson County, that's for sure. If you've any comments or suggestions, send them to jamesh@folklore.com. And thanks for listening.